Good evening, City of Clawson. It's the 27th of September, 2021 at 18:39. Welcome to the joint meeting of the City Council and the Planning Commission. August, could you take the roll for the council?
Mayor Scripture. Mayor Pro Tem Sampson.
Here.
Councilman Georges. Here. Councilman Moffitt. Present. Councilman Shepard. Here. 4 out of 5.
Okay, George, want to do yours?
Evening, my name is Greg Casera. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and August, would you do a roll call for planning?
Nope.
Nope?
I don't even know who's on the planning.
You want to do that?
I was told I was doing the roll call.
Okay, so we got one over there, right? Lauren? Mr. Newshi's one, and then we have Mr. Fitzer, right? Correct? And I don't think anybody else from planning showed up tonight. Oh, Aaron snuck in at the last minute. Okay. Evening.
Okay, Joe, we're going to turn it over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jill Boehm. I'm a partner with Giffords Webster and the city's planning consultant along with Joe Tangari. We are going to give you an overview of the capital improvement planning process and then do a little hands-on exercise. So if you remember, we did this overview of the capital improvement planning process a year ago maybe. And so this is a little bit of a refresher and then an opportunity for you to kind of get in and see how it all works, which I think will help as we move into that process coming up in the next couple of months. Since I know there's at least one person that doesn't know everybody here, I will maybe starting with you, would you like to introduce yourself so that everybody knows who everybody is that's here?
Sure. I'm Laurent and I'm part of the Planning Commission.
Go ahead.
Kelly Roth, Finance Director.
Sorry, this is Henry, my son.
Hi, Henry. Thanks for coming.
August, the city clerk.
Darren, Planning Commission.
Sam Fitzer, Planning Commission.
Scott Zarello, Police Chief, Interim City Manager.
Troy Engelon, Fire Chief.
Trevor Zablocki, Assistant Superintendent, DPW.
Gina Boyd, I am Director of Rec and Seniors.
Jenny Gannad, Library Director.
Leah Davis, Curator of Museum.
Sue Mathis, City Council.
Mike Smith, AEW, Engineering Consultant.
Glenn Shepard, City Council.
Scott Lockwood, AEW, Engineering Consultant.
We'll get you in the back.
Stacy, City Treasurer.
Thank you.
Georges, City Council.
Yeah.
There's Mayor Pro Tem.
Greg Casera, chair of the planning.
Excellent. Thank you. It's nice that we have a good mix of folks who are going to be working on this project together. Typically, this is a staff-led initiative, but as you'll hear, the Planning Commission has a large role in this before we get to council, and it will help council with their budgetary process. So we'll go through this real quick. So we're going to talk about what a capital improvement program is, what the requirements are, how to do that, how to prepare it, and then our little hands-on exercise. So first, what is a capital improvement plan? So the capital improvement plan is the schedule of the city's proposed improvements over a 6-year period. It is updated annually, and the first year of the capital improvement program is the capital budget for the next year. So some of the things that we would expect to see in a capital improvement plan would be city halls, city buildings, city halls, courthouse, jails, police fire stations, libraries, parks, and other capital expenditures, streets, roads, sidewalks, parking lots, and anything related to sewer and water. There might be other things. We may do land purchases. We may include street lighting, building additions. If we were a really large community, maybe we would be talking about airports or disposal sites, recreation buildings as well. There are some things that might be considered capital improvements. So we might have a fire truck. That could be a big capital improvement that we need to plan ahead for. Road graders or other equipment, computer systems sometimes fall into that category. Parking meters, police cars, playground equipment, and public safety systems. Those are our generally considered capital expenditures, but some things that aren't could be things like library books or fire hoses, lawnmowers, depending on their size, pothole repairs, anything that's related to the maintenance, gravel, office machines, because they typically don't rise to the level of being that capital expenditure. And it is typically something that is set within the city, and every city has a different threshold for things that are considered capital expenditures, and that should be included in the capital improvement plan. The Michigan Planning Enabling Act gives this authority to create and actually directs the Planning Commission to create the capital improvement plan. This is something that was an addition in 2008 with the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, and a lot of communities haven't necessarily done that over the years. There's been, it was something that was done administratively. It was something that maybe the engineers took care of, or DPW, because they were the ones that were doing most of those capital expenditures. But what the Planning Enabling Act recognized was that the Planning Commission is the one that's responsible for adopting the city's master plan. And because included in the master plan or in the recreation plan, there are also capital expenditures. And in the master plan, we're talking about things like streets and sidewalks and buildings and community facilities, that really that responsibility should lie with them. And so that was put into the Michigan Planning Enabling Act in 2008. So all cities, villages, and townships and counties with an adopted master plan are required to prepare that CIP unless they're exempted by statute or the legislative body. There are some communities who in their charter, they have a statement saying that the city manager takes care of it, or they make some other provision for that. But if they don't have that, then it's the Planning Commission. And what's really, I think, the strength of the capital improvement planning process is that it's a collaborative effort, or it should be a collaborative effort. And I think that's one of the good changes that came with that change in state law in 2008, having it rest with the Planning Commission. Frequently, we find, especially when communities are taking this on for the first time, planning commissioners have not really had any kind of experience with this. So here we are now talking about this and getting the planning commissioners exposed and the different staff people exposed to the projects and capital expenditures needed by other departments, and sort of that balancing act. How do we plan for this comprehensively? How do we make these changes and adapt our budgets so that we can accomplish all these things together? So anybody who's in the local government should participate. So department heads are typically what we have who are involved. And then if there are, occasionally we see local units of government, neighbors that might do that, or other entities with jurisdiction. So maybe we would invite the Road Commission for Oakland County, or at least be tapping into some of the resources that they have available. They may not have the staff power to participate directly, but certainly making ourselves aware of their information. So the Planning Commission is responsible for that, and that's included in the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. So when we talk about how to prepare, well, actually I should go back for a second. Are there any questions on what the CIP is? It's pretty straightforward, right? Okay. So when we talk about preparing it, this is the part that's kind of important, and this can be kind of the challenge for communities as they start this process. Once you get into it, next year, the year after, it'll become easier. But I think the first time is always a little bit of trying to find your way. But it's important at the very beginning to figure out who's going to start this process, who's going to lead the process, who's going to be involved, and how are we going to establish this team. And then this background for this team, what are all of the policies, regulations, budget projections? So what are all the background documents that are needed by the team? This will also include the city's master plan, the downtown plan, parks and recreation plan, any other long-range plans that have an impact on capital expenditures and projects. And then those folks who are identified to be on the team will get together and they will talk about these things at a high level. So we'll talk about the master plan, we'll talk about parks and rec plan, we'll talk about any of the other policies that we have to make sure everybody's on the same page with at least the big picture. Where are we going? And then each of those department heads will go back and they will take their project sheets and they will fill out all the projects that they have in mind. And those are the subject matter experts. Those are the folks who know, you all know as staff, what you need, what your department needs, and when you need it and why you need it and how much that's going to cost. And so that all goes on to your project sheet. And once all those sheets are collected, then those all go to the review team. And this is where things get interesting. So the review team is going to get together and actually back up in step number 3, probably. The team is going to talk about their ranking criteria. And so obviously things that are required by federal law or state law, those are going to be things that we have to do no matter what. There could be other things that are capital expenditures intended to save us money in the short term or in the long term. So those might raise up to be a higher level. There might be catalyst projects that if we spend money here, then that could trigger additional projects in another area. So when we start the process, we want to make sure that we understand how our rankings are and what our priorities are. And we'll talk about that when we get into the exercises. And so then the team will get together and they will rank all those projects. So this is the part that's pretty interesting. When the fire department has a request and the police department have requests and the library has a request, how do we balance out the needs for that? You obviously are going to advocate because your things are the most important. But that's why having this team approach is really useful, because then you start to understand, well, the police department needs to have these new safety vests, and we have to have that, and it's a significant capital expense. And that's a requirement now of federal law. So now we have to do that. So that might mean that we have to trade off some things. We have to do that in the first year. Maybe we bump these other projects to years 2 or 3. There's also going to be an opportunity in there where we say, well, this is true, we have this expense, but we can get a grant for half of that. Well, that's good to know, because we not only want to say, oh, we're going to get a grant for that, so we can do that next year, but we're also going to say, oh, but we also have to plan for the half, that's our half to budget, to match that grant. So it's good to keep those things in mind. Sometimes we just rely on, oh, we're going to get money to do that, but we have to plan for the city's contribution for those things. So once the capital improvement plan is drafted, and that's a result of the project, that we take in the project descriptions and the rankings and the spreadsheets, then that goes to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission will review this, and the way we like to do it is at that meeting the review team is there, and the Planning Commission is going to walk through this, and there's going to be things that they don't understand. They're going to want to know, what is this new pumper truck that the fire department needs, and why do you need it? Do you really need it now, or could you just wait until 5 years from now? Like, there's other projects on here, but they want to hear from the department heads. They want to know why we need what we need when we need it. And then after they're comfortable with that, which usually is just, in most of our experience, like a meeting or two, because you're going to have at least 2 members of the Planning Commission on this review team. So there will be a comfort level, I think, at the Planning Commission, because we will have some participation from you during this process. And your, I think, fellow planning commissioners will understand that and trust that you've asked all these questions already, but this is their chance to talk too. And then they'll hold the public hearing. And so that's another really good time for the community to understand and have this sort of presented in this methodical way. I think when you talk about it in this way, and the way that there's been balance and give and take from all the different department heads and real thought behind this process, it makes sense. And I think that just increases your transparency to the community, and I think it makes your planning better and more comprehensive. So after that, then the Planning Commission will adopt it, that capital improvement plan, and transmit it along to City Council, and then City Council will have that, and that first year of the capital improvement plan will be your budget for the next year, as you see fit. Now, that doesn't mean that the City Council can't make changes to that, but you're going to have all this background information that I think will really help you understand why those numbers are there in that first year. So again, as we think about ranking the projects, these are some of the things that we'll think about. Things that contribute to the community's health, safety, and welfare, things needed to comply with local, state, or federal law, things that fix an existing or projected deficiency, so we know something's going to break next year, we want to get ahead of it because it'll be really expensive then. Something that reduces future costs, so future operating costs over time. If we buy this particular piece of equipment, it's going to save us time because we won't have to have 2 people operating. We might just need 1 person. Not that we want to get rid of anybody, but they could be doing other things that are more productive for their time. things that implement the master plan, things that protect natural resources. We might be doing things to help mitigate stormwater or make sure the water is clean. Supporting the local economy is also important. So are there projects in here that might, as I said earlier, be a catalyst for other things? If we invest in this, would that then maybe trigger some additional investment elsewhere? And then delivers the level of service desired by the community. And I think that's something that's important to consider too. And also convey to residents when they say, well, how come you're not doing this? You know, this is what we expect. Well, we have a lot of things to balance. If you want this high level of service, also, when we see the numbers at the end of the day, that may point to a need to either find additional resources somehow or scale some things back. So we also are thinking about the funding sources in the capital improvement plan, and we're going to talk about that too. So we have general funds, of course, but there's bonds, there's millage, there's tax increment financing. We do have a DDA, and they do collect tax increment financing, and they're able to use that revenue for projects, as well as other fees. And there's also utilities and road funds, so there's revolving loan funds, potentially MDOT or County Road Commission. There are facilities improvements. The Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund is a good one for parks and recreation projects, and MDOT. And then there's other places that we can look to for some of these additional funding opportunities. There's not, I mean, there's some, and I think sometimes people think, oh, well, you know, there's grants everywhere. There are, but they may not always necessarily fit our community. So we don't want to overly rely on those things, but we can begin to look for other opportunities. So that's really what I have in terms of the background, like what this is and why we're doing it and how we're going to do it. Does anyone have any general questions about that or the process?
When's the process start?
Well, we're going to start right now with an exercise, but after that, we're going to hopefully start this off. I think we talked about starting it with the staff next month. We want to kind of get a jump on it. So we think October, November, December, and then have that, maybe the Planning Commission has their public hearing in January that gives it to you in February, which I think falls nicely in line with the planning process for council and your budget. So that's our...
You're looking at putting a group of these people together. Mm-hmm. How do we establish who's going to be in the group?
Well, it'll be all the department heads, and that'll come from city manager. And then the planning commission, I'd like to get, and we can do this tomorrow night at the planning commission meeting, ask for 2 or 3 folks from planning commission to volunteer to be on the subcommittee. And this would be not an extensive long-term commitment. It's probably a 3-month thing, probably 3 or 4 meetings.
How often are you picturing meetings of this group? Like once a month? Or?
It would probably be once or possibly twice, just probably 4 times between October and December. Is what I would imagine. So not an extensive amount of time. Really, it's going to be up to staff. They'll have more work to do on their end because they're going to be compiling all their projects, doing all the ranking. So when those materials go out to the folks that are on the committee, they will have hopefully some time to review the material before they come to the meeting and ask questions and things like that.
I never knew that the city of Clausen had to do this until when this was.
About March 2nd.
Yeah.
Several months ago, I got contacted by the Michigan Association of Planning. I attended the meeting.
Nice.
Award, and
Excellent.
It was a fun day because they gave you a question mark in the back here. We went through a fictitious city.
Oh, well, this is what we're going to do again. So
I
maybe
learned a
you're
lot-
not going to be able to
lot in that
participate.
day that I didn't even
No
conceive
cheating
that.
and no telling everybody the answers.
I didn't have any realization that the planning commission would be doing that. I always thought that was.
You're not alone, and Klaus, you shouldn't feel like you've been missing out or that you've been doing something wrong all these years. Sometimes it just takes time for that knowledge to come down to the folks that are really doing the work. So, in a lot of communities that have a long established administration, they just do it. But I think we seem to find that when people are more aware of this process, that it makes sense. And it does, I think, give out that additional transparency, and it does give the community a little bit more ability to be engaged and understand things from beginning to end. So, all right.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
First question is,
is there someone that we're sourcing to get community feedback in terms of things? I know that in the rankings, community was one of them. Are we using a resource in order to see high priority for residents, or how are we judging that?
We hadn't done that. I think this year we were going to go based on the available data that we have, so the available plans that we have. I don't know that the city's done a survey in a while, but we might want to consider doing that. I don't know if we have enough time this year, but maybe next year we can do that.
Okay.
But certainly, all the planning commission meetings are open to the public. The public hearing will be available, and we'll have information online. So there will be opportunities for people to see what's going on and to be involved in that process too.
Okay, and my second question, I know you talked a lot about grants. Who's responsible? Is each department responsible for writing their own grant? I don't know, I forget what it's called. But when they apply for a grant, is each department like going out and sourcing those grants and looking for money there? And is that going to be a part of our, as a planning commission? That might be a question we want to ask, is like, how many alternatives did you look for sources of money before coming here for this amount of money, right?
Right.
Is that something that we're kind of...
I think that the department heads have maybe just heard that request.
Okay.
And I would say probably generally speaking, you all you know what the typical grant sources are and try to identify those opportunities as you see them already, I'm sure. So
Part of the request anyway, there's a line in there, grant or other funding you have to put.
Right.
You know, no grants available or there are grants. So yeah, each
Yeah.
department on the request searches their own.
Right,
funding.
they will. But just maybe thinking about that now, maybe do an extra search to see if anything new comes up that you hadn't seen before, because that question will be asked.
Applying and writing their own...
Well, I think that's up to administration as to how they do it. I think if they're identified, that there's always ways to figure out how to get the grants written. And it depends on the level. Some of them are so complicated and require a lot of maintenance to keep up and document as you go through that sometimes communities are like, you know what, for $10,000, it's just not worth it. But it depends on what it is and what it's for and how much record keeping and administrative aspect there is to it. But it's a good question.
I was just going to make a comment that there was a small community survey done during the budget process this year. So.
Oh, that's perfect. Will you send that to us? We can include that. Good, thank you. Perfect. All right, what else? Who else? No? Okay. So, now, yes, Greg's going to tell you what what the exercise is. It's probably going to look pretty familiar.
I played the disgruntled resident in the game that we
Okay, well then, yeah, you can't be that one again. So let's see, how many do we have? We've got, including Henry, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So maybe three groups. If I know that some of you are masked, probably we should wear masks while we're at the tables and we're talking to each other. Even if, because I think 5, well, you could do it with 5 people. So that would be 4 groups of 5. Let's do that then. 4 groups of 5, that gives you a little more space. But maybe mix it up a little bit so like all the staff aren't together and all the planning commission aren't together. I would have you count off, but I will trust you that you can mix yourselves up. And then what we'll do is Joe and I will give you some of the background information, but generally, oh, you've got those. So on the first sheet that Joe's going to hand out, it shows you what the available dollars are, and it goes by pot of money. So you'll see there's general fund money, there's TIF money, there's the SR2S. There's a fund there that's Safe Routes to School that relates to one of the items on the budget list. And once you identify your roles that you'll see when you get there, then we'll take a look at the sheet number 1. And sheet number 1 lists all of the projects. So we're going to assume that you've already, all the staff has submitted their projects and they're listed here. On the back of this sheet, let me just hold that up for a second. Thank you. As one of the first items, you're going to identify who's going to be the lead. So of the roles in the packet, you're going to pick one of those folks to be your lead of the team. And then you'll identify a little bit of your process. So you don't overthink this. This is just for an example and guidance about what we could do. And then, all right. And then you're going to look through the list of projects here, but you're also first going to look at the criteria. And you're going to say whether you agree with those, and then there's an opportunity there to look at each one of those projects with respect to the criteria. Okay. And then the next page will show this one. And we'll come back. We'll come around and explain this. I'm just trying to give you an overview. So then in this page, when you get the total score will go here, and then you can allocate the funds over the next 6 years. So that's probably a little bit more of the challenge, but that's where you get to see some of the give and take of the whole process. So we'll just put these on the table, and then we'll come around and help everybody get organized on this as you get organized. I've got pens too.
All right, so do basketball. Contribute to health and safety and welfare. Not really.
Hopefully you've all picked your roles, and you've talked about your process, about who's in charge of your process, and generally how often you're going to meet. This is sort of just, it should take you a minute or two, right? All right, and then once you get to number 4, which is the list of projects, which I heard you guys mention, there's a blank space, I think, under each one of those elements, and you'll see there's at the bottom, it'll tell you which department they are. If your group feels that something's missing, or you think a project isn't necessary, that's what you can do in that spot. You can add something, so somebody might have forgotten something, or someone else may have thought of another project. So if you want to do that, you can do that before you look at your criteria. Okay. And so we'll probably just do about 10, maybe 15 more minutes tops, okay?
So should we just stop with what we've ranked? and
You
start
can,
with the-
yeah. If you want to just do a handful of the project, just so that you can, what we'll really want is to have that feedback from each group about like how the process went and how you made the decisions about the criteria and the projects, and so I think that'll be helpful. So we'll do like 10, 15 more minutes and then we'll cut it off. It sounds like we had some very lively conversations, which has been great. Hopefully you found this an interesting exercise. I would not imagine that anybody completed it except for the group in the back. You probably have the whole thing done because you've changed all the budget. That's right, we had a recall over here.
We've got a lot of things, but we also adopted a new process called, we get rid of this local government thing, I'm supreme dictator. Things are way back.
Interesting that happened at 3 out of the 4 tables. I don't know if your table had that happen, but there was at least one person at each of the other tables who said something along the lines of, I'm in charge, this is what we're doing. I'm not going to name names.
Very cooperative amongst us. We gave Sam water.
The you people will be on our committee then. Or with Sam, you're going to probably be drafted.
The hard part about this is that we really don't know the condition of some of these things.
Right. Right. That is the hard thing. I agree.
In our town, we know the condition of something.
Exactly.
We need a copier from the library right now. And we need to go out and buy that thing tomorrow.
That is one of the challenges of this exercise, is not being able to really give people the background that you need to be able to make some of these decisions. We'd have to, and that's why it's role playing. You just kind of make stuff up as you go. Like, we really need these things because we've got a lot of people setting fires in the
We
community.
asked the bike lanes.
I wondered if anybody would do that.
Yeah, we asked it. We don't need it.
Yeah. That's interesting because I actually changed that line item in this exercise just for you because I thought the other one was like a non-motorized trail, and I was like, oh, I don't know, let's make it something more like a bike lane on Maple, which would be Main Street. And I knew that there would be people who wouldn't like that.
No,
But that's fine.
and an alternate vehicle trail. Oh,
Yeah.
we'd get behind that.
All right. Well, good. I don't know that maybe necessarily we need to report out like from each table, but sort of, did anybody have any other things that they wanted to share in terms of the rankings or looking at the criteria or how that process really works?
Well, one thing that we kind of discussed is that, the criteria is sort of, I guess esoteric is the word that comes to mind, and it's important to have a criteria that talks about, there's some stuff that just needs to have priority because it's that important, so the criteria needs to be able to suss out those things versus sort of the touchy-feely kind of aspects of some of these things. Some of them are super important, and none of these criteria really help you identify that.
Yeah, I think another way, instead of having the big ranking where we look at each one of the categories and say, like, does it need a 3, does it need a 1, does it need a 0, that we say, something gets a 5, and here's why. And there's a pretty nice description of what makes a project a 5. And same with 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And you probably wouldn't even have a project on there that was a 0, because usually you recognize, the department has at least recognized that you're not asking for everything. You're really asking for stuff that you need. And so it's going to have at least some sort of point system to it. So that makes it a little bit different from the exercise for what we actually do in practice. But it helps you think through those individual components that make up the voting. So hopefully that was at least helpful to think through some of those things.
I have a question. When it came to needed to comply with local, state, or federal law, so does that mean like the project implemented has to, or is it needed in order to comply?
It's needed in order to comply. Yeah.
We left 88 curb cuts off there. That's the kind of stuff you have to sometimes have to do.
Right, or if it was, I go back to public safety often has a component that's required. So whether it's a certain type of equipment or,
Defibrillator or something.
yeah, it would have to be something really substantial to qualify, but that might be something where you'd say, this is this new law that's come down and we have to do this.
Were we right to cross off everything DDA since we have no right to tell them how to spend their money?
Well,
Because that's what we did.
yeah, okay. No, there may be things that, I think it's helpful for you, the city, you, council, to have an idea and understanding of the DDA's expenditures.
Well, we did tell them.
But also there may be places where there can be sharing of funds. as well.
You might look at, you know, you have a grant that's a third, they have a third, the city has a third. Or something.
Right, exactly.
We're getting them streetlights. Let's do this.
Any other observations, comments, questions?
What's wrong with the streetlights we got? They just fall down every once in a while.
Cooler ones.
They're expensive.
One thing George pointed out, and Glenn, agreed with, I think we all agreed with, it. When you get the last one, it says, I can't remember exactly what it says, desired level of service by community.
Yeah.
We're virtually putting 3 for all those, which is kind of a point. Everybody in your community
Right.
wants everything, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So we actually decided that we were not gonna consider that. I mean, we were,
Yes.
but it's, everybody wants everything, right?
You can almost drop it off the category.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think that is fair to say.
Yeah.
We actually canceled everything and put all the money into the roads.
Yeah. Well,
That
that has
was
its
not
own
my-
issues as well. Yeah, that's how a lot of the capital improvement plans have been in the past, and now we try to bring that out so that we can have other departments have a chance.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'll plant them myself.
Right, but one of the other.
Plumbing under the road first, just saying.
Yeah, well, and one of the other things, one of the other benefits of having this process is if, for example, you knew that a road was going to go under repair and it was near a park, and we said, oh, well, actually, we could do these 2 projects at the same time because they'll be there, they'll close these roads anyway. So maybe, in year 3, we're going to combine these things together. Or at least put them in the same year so that we're planning for them and only having one disruption.
That's
So,
going to be the same thing with water on the road.
exactly,
You got to tear up a road to get to the water.
exactly.
Not just fix it.
That's the idea behind all this, is that we're trying to be a little bit more comprehensive and think about things concurrently so that we can minimize disruptions and maximize efficiencies and hopefully save money in the long run too. So,
Is this the way we would do it potentially on planning, this exact format?
so the whole planning commission won't do that exercise. You will see the committees will have, and it won't be that same grid. It'll probably be a more straightforward project sheet, but you'll have a lot more description too. You'll have a lot more of an explanation from the department heads, and if we don't get that, we'll ask them for that. A little bit about sort of, what have you done in the past? What are you doing now? Why do you need this thing? And you'll have that. You'll see the project ranking, and then it'll all be put together in the spreadsheet. The subcommittee will look at those project rankings and maybe just determine whether they agree with them or not too.
Okay, because for me, it might be helpful to look at each individual department, like going down through here, I'm almost like
you will.
ranking them, like, oh, well, we just need this overall or this overall. And
Yeah.
there might be a department that gets overlooked, whereas if you just look at that department in itself or what it might need.
Yeah. The
and I
review
know this
team,
was just an
it
activity.
is. The review team will get all the project sheets from the department. So say police has 6 things that they need. So you'll see 6 sheets, and each sheet will be each one of those items, and it'll have the reason why they need it, the amount of money, the year that they would anticipate needing it by. And so when the review committee gets together and looks at that, they will see each department and they will see each of those projects explained in more detail, which is something that, we could be here all night and do that way, but we didn't think we needed to do that tonight with you.
Now, this is done every year, right?
This is done every year. So the first year is always the hardest because you're like, well, I don't know.
Okay, now, as you go along, year after year, everything can change.
Well, yeah. Now, if we do it this way the first year, the next year, in theory, some of those things can just get bumped, right? They get bumped up. Sometimes things get bumped for 6 years, and then in the year 7, you're like, are we really going to do this? We're working with one community right now who has that. They have had an item on their CIP for, I think it's been 6 years, and now they really need to make some decisions. Is this something that we're going to continue to do? And if so, why haven't we done it till this point? The answer is because we don't have enough resources. And then we say, do we need more to find more resources, or do we need to rethink this project, or do we need to get rid of it altogether?
Your annual prioritization is kind of like a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
As each year goes by, the other projects move along toward that point where they're going to be done, and sometimes you push one back and
Right.
advance another one, or put a new one on there that you didn't know was going to be there. sometimes there's so many of them coming at you, you're like Lucy in the factory. You
Yeah.
just can't quite handle them all, but,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, it needs to be refined, and you're not gonna get it exactly right the first time, but
And-
once you're into year 6, you'll have it pretty well oiled. You know?
Yeah, and you can always make changes to that. It's not set in stone, like you said last year that you were going to do this project this year. Things change. Resources become available, resources become unavailable. Other projects rise to the top because now maybe theirs has some kind of federal requirement or some other urgent need that we have to attend to. So maybe something that was in year 2 now gets moved to year 3 because we just had to reallocate. Sometimes at the end of the year, as we're getting ready to do this again next year, we'll say, the first question we ask is, here's what you had last year. Did you do all these things? Here's your 2 or 3 things that you were going to do this year. And no, we didn't get to it because we had something else come up and we couldn't spend the money for whatever reason. So is that something that we're going to put on for next year?
Just very quickly, okay, with this federal legislation that's going on, what, the 3.5 trillion, is there any indication for the city the size of Clawson, what we would anticipate or expect to come down?
Not yet.
I don't think so.
Something will probably be something, though.
There's a lot there.
Oh, yeah.
So I would,
Just to throw out a little tidbit, there's about 91,000 communities in the United States, and their overall budget's 3.5 trillion. Does that sound familiar?
interesting coincidence.
Just numbers.
Yep, you're the numbers guy. What else? No? All right, well, thank you for your attendance and your, clap for yourselves because you guys participated. I really appreciate it. What's the best when I hear is people talking and being engaged, and we heard that, so we really thank you for your engagement and your being here and your participation. So.